Democratic presidential candidate RFK Jr. spoke to world-renowned journalist Mr. Glenn Greenwald about several very notable figures, a couple being Julian Assange and Edward Snowden, and what he would do on their behalf pertaining to pardoning them if he were indeed to be elected president. I want you to take a look at his commentary here and what he had to say. And it's very notable because obviously, needless to say, it's different from what the groupthink is in Washington, but it's a way of thought that needs to be adopted not only by our leading politicians, but by the general public that may not even know of this information.
You talked a lot about the extreme deceit on the part of the intelligence communities when it comes to these various wars. In the Vietnam War, there was someone named Daniel Ellsberg who kind of was an original advocate of the war, helped to plan it, got to the point where because of his access to top secret information, he turned against it, released the Pentagon Papers to show the government was lying about that war. He was turned into a criminal. Julian Assange, Edward Snowden are two people who did the same thing, Chelsea Manning, but as part of the war on terror, they're now being turned into criminals. Chelsea Manning spent time in prison. Julian Assange is trying to be extradited. Snowden is in asylum. What do you think about that group of whistleblowers or people who have published these massive amounts of information that were labeled top secret? And would you use your presidential power to pardon them and to protect them from further criminal liability?
Yeah, I mean, I would put a statue of Snowden in Washington. I mean, I think that when Snowden released, nobody in our country knew about that. The intelligence agencies were mining all of our data and spying on Americans.
Members of Congress didn't know. I remember members of Congress calling me and saying, "Tell me what's going on. I'm not in the Intelligence Committee, and I haven't heard this."
Yeah, and Congress then went and acted on what he told them to change the rules. Oh, how are you making this guy a criminal? He's an American hero. Yeah, I'm going to pardon those guys, up front. I mean, I'm going to look at their cases. Assange, I'm going to pardon on day one because it is insane. He's effectively a newspaper publisher. And I don't see why every newspaper publisher in this country is not out there, with pitchforks and torches in front of the White House saying, let this guy go. He didn't, what did he do wrong?
Especially since a lot of them published the same documents he did. He partnered with the New York Times and the Guardian and El País. And it's amazing what a threat it is to every journalist in this country. I think the problem is a lot of these journalists don't actually ever act adversarially to the intelligence communities and therefore rightly don't feel threatened by prosecutions of journalists who do.
In that video, you may have seen Glenn Greenwald make mention of Mr. Daniel Ellsberg, another hero, I would say, who, as he outlined there in the video very briefly, gave us details of the atrocities that were going on during the war in Vietnam that he obviously turned against, which propelled him to expose the things that he did, and they did indeed criminalize him. But Mr. Ellsberg unfortunately passed away a little over a week ago. One of the books I'm reading is one of his works titled The Doomsday Machine, but that's neither here nor there. But he talks to RFK Jr. and he asked him, what will you do with these individuals on their behalf if you were to be elected president? And he says, I will pardon them on day one. He says there should be a statue of Edward Snowden. And, there's a reoccurring trend with these people, whether it be Ellsberg, Chelsea Manning, Snowden, Julian Assange, Daniel Hale, who's currently locked up. I'm not sure what facility, but Daniel Hale is the person that told us about the failed drone strikes and how ridiculous those things are and how they mostly kill innocent people. And I believe I made a video on it in the past. Maybe I haven't, but if you don't know about that, I highly suggest you look into it. It's incredibly frightening, like much of this stuff is. But a recurring trend with these individuals is that they are being criminalized by the United States government for doing the public favors. I mean, that may sound extremely simplistic, but that's kind of what it is. They're doing us a favor by giving us information and incredibly important things and details that we otherwise wouldn't get because the government wouldn't let us know. The military generals and the politicians and the people that run the country wouldn't let us know. And as it pertains to certain situations, the politicians don't even know. Regarding Mr. Snowden, and how the NSA was spying on us and violating our rights and stealing all of our metadata and what have you. They didn't even know. And as RFK outlined in that video, they even took precautions once they found out this particular information. But the groupthink is so strong in Washington that they're all aligned. Like the extradition of Julian Assange, he's currently fighting against it. God knows what's going to happen. I don't really want to speak on it. That's, that can create a very long video. But he's currently fighting an extradition to the United States, where if he were to arrive, they were to throw the book at him. Now, the pretense for this is absolutely insane. So, as RFK said in that video, he's being prosecuted for being a newspaper publisher, aka a journalist. All he did was release information that the strongest government in history, that the strongest empire, in history, would not like the public to know. So now this is their retaliation. Need I remind you, Julian Assange isn't even an American citizen. So what kind of precedent does this set? Okay, this says that any government, doesn't matter if you're the strongest government in the history of the world, or strongest empire in the history of the world, with the strongest and biggest military, doesn't matter who you are. If there's a journalist out there, citizen of your country or not, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter where they are. If they do something that you don't like publish and give out information to the public about you committing atrocities and war crimes and this, that, and the third, they can then come find you, they can seize you, and they can bring you in, and they can throw you in jail, and then throw away the key after they do that. That's the precedent that this sets. And, whether it's the long line of corrupted officials that he and his lawyers and his team has had to deal with as they fight quite literally for his life. They've said that if he is extradited to the U.S., his risk of suicide or self-harm or whatever it was that they said becomes so much higher. And that just speaks to the momentum of this entire situation. But I thought that this was good to hear. I like to play clips like this when it's different from what the mainstream, group think is. He being Julian Assange is being persecuted for being a journalist. There's so many journalists, not just in this country, but around the world. But specifically in this country, as Glenn Greenwald outlined, the New York Times and the Washington Post and other big publishers help put these stories out with Julian Assange. They're not standing up on his behalf. Why are they not doing it? Well, they're not doing it because it's inconvenient for them. They don't have it in them to stand for what's right and for what's good. It becomes inconvenient. They may lose their job. They may get fired. They may fill in the blank. And for what? To help out someone else. And as harsh as that may sound, it is the harsh truth of the matter. But this is something that I wanted to bring forth, something that I wanted to show. And a little closing comment, how many regular people that consume mainstream media, that consume CNN, Fox, MSNBC, regular news, the radio, how many of these people even know who this man is? How many of these people even know what he's done, the kind of work he's done, the details of said work, the actions and atrocities that their military is committing, that he has shown us that they have no clue. I've actually talked to people and I've tried to break it down for them in the best way that I can. And needless to say, they had no idea that this is something that's even going on. So the word needs to be spread around first and foremost. And then people have to get together and do something about it. And it honestly, at this point, who knows what it would take. But I think it would be a great step in to take for people to get together and be loud about this and be extremely obnoxious about this and not let this go over quietly. Because all they want to do, them being the U.S., is get him in here very quietly. Nobody really even knows what's going on. Him being Julian Assange. And, well, we're just going to throw the book at him, and we're going to put him away to where nobody ever has to see him again, and he can't embarrass us again, and none of this can happen again. And so, it's a very sad situation. The same with Daniel Hill. The same with Edward Snowden. I mean, Edward Snowden is being held hostage, not by Russia, not by Vladimir Putin, but by the U.S. because he can't come home. He's a U.S. citizen. He's not allowed to come home. Otherwise, he'll face retribution for his crimes or whatever. But anyway, this was RFK Jr., Democratic presidential candidate, and this is his opinion on, dare I say, a bunch of freedom fighters.